Okay, so this is the Polygon T7, Polygon Siskiu T7 in 29-inch wheel and extra large size. I'm going to do a little bike review, and my point of comparison will be the Vitus Mythique VR, but since this is a higher budget bike, on paper we're going to compare it to the VRS, but I haven't ridden that bike. The bike that I rode before was the VR. So we'll start with the geometry, and these should be accurate for the sort of 2021 or 2022 models. The Polygon, keep in mind, you know, with mountain biking, sizing is going to be a little bit different, wheel to wheel, size to size, depending on which version you get. But this is going to be, I got the specs for extra large 29er for the Polygon and the Vitus. So this bike is 65.5 head tube angle and 76.5 C tube angle, whereas the Vitus is 66 up front and 75.5 back. So not a big difference. I guess if you want to be real picky, that might be a choosing point for you, but otherwise mostly identical. The reach is 500 mil for this, and then for the Vitus it's 485. The stack is 635 here, and the Vitus is 642. So this bike will technically, by a very small margin, be longer and lower, and the Polygon will be a bit shorter, and that stack, that sort of cockpit height, will go up a bit longer. Wheelbase is virtually identical. So I'll still stand by some of the things that I used to say about Vitus being a great sort of jumping bike and very active, playful bike, and Polygon's more traditionally trail, even though they're very close, so it doesn't matter. You just have to adjust your riding style a tiny bit. One of the bigger differences that I had noticed, and I just noticed this going over the specs, so right away, the Rockshox Suspension is superior in my opinion, particularly for the shock, rear shock with that nice climbing switch there. And the VRS apparently comes with a climbing switch, but it's that X-Fusion shock that I absolutely hate and puts me off of any bike that is running that shock. However, up in the fork department, this is just a sort of standard 32 mil, very entry level size fork, and the VRS actually has a 34 millimeter, because this bike is 135 in the back, 140 front for suspension. The Vitus is 140, not a big difference, but when you get those nice 34 millimeter stanchions instead of the 32 on this, it's just going to be a lot stiffer, and if you are planning to really ride aggressively, that could actually be a big deciding factor in getting that bike versus this one. Another small little change between the Polygon and the Vitus. The Polygon comes 32 tooth, and if you get the bigger sizes, 175 cranks, super awesome, and that rear cassette goes 10 to 51, whereas Vitus is 11 to 51. When you put this thing in the hardest gear, it absolutely goes. That said, both of those cassettes are going to end at 51, and the Vitus has 30 just 30 tooth chain ring, so going to be better for climbing by a small margin, and it has 170 cranks. That's a preference thing. I come from BMX. I like big long cranks, but you know, you're mountain biking, there's obstacles, pedal striking, you might prefer 170 in general. And like I said, when this cassette is 10 to 51 and the Vitus is 11 to 51, this is 12-speed format, which means more gears, heavier, and thinner, even thinner chain, whereas the Vitus is 11-speed format. That might be a positive to you. You're not losing anything on range. It's literally 10 to 51 or 11 to 51. If I had a choice, I would actually prefer that Vitus Cassette. I want less gears to go through, less weight to deal with, and potentially a slightly sturdier, wider chain, although I think these chains are very similar. These are very small margins we're talking about. And I did absolutely smack the life out of my chain and sprocket on a rock today. There's my chain, probably done. I'll try to splice that GoPro footage in real quick. And it survived that, thankfully, because that was literally the first thing I did when I got to the trail today. Some more small differences between Vitus and Polygon. The bars are 780 on, I think, every version of the T7, which means you can, cut them as you please, and if you want to leave them 780, you can do that. And then the stem is a very tidy, very nimble 35, and that feels great. The stem on the Vitus is 50, not a huge difference, depends on your riding style. For most people, beginners, that won't bother them, but that short stem brings your fulcrum tighter into your fork, into your entire steerer tube. And the Vitus comes in 780 for the larger sizes, but for the smaller sizes they throw 760 bars on it. So if you actually prefer wide, like 780 or 800, you may be compelled to simply swap that out. And then something that I love that's really a big, the dropper on this bike slams all the way down and it feels perfect. I was worried that going extra large and 29er might be an issue. I'm only 6 foot, I'm not more than 6 foot, so I'm kind of a tweener size technically, but this dropper slams right into the frame. It comes up a whole 170 mil, and then the smaller bikes come with 150 mil, and the range is perfect. It goes right up to your pedaling stroke, and then when you slam it down it gets right out of the way, whereas with the Vitus they haven't changed the frame. They don't seem to have solved the problem of having the dropper not insert all the way, and then going even further, the droppers on that bike, they have a bunch of variants. The XL only goes to 150, and then if you were to get a small size, that dropper that they put on that is only like 100 mil. So far from ideal for getting the ideal pedal stroke and also getting it out of your way. Some more small details, some nice internal routing system for all your cables and the dropper. Whereas the Vitus is half internal, so the seat tube element for the dropper is internal, but all your cables will be ran on the down tube on the Vitus. Whereas Polygon, you see them nicely and sleekly fitting into the frame and coming out near the head tube. We'll move on to some of these peripherals. The grips that came with it, very good, soft compound. I'm not going to replace these. I'm going to ride these out, see how I like them long term. Tires, don't even need to mention them, just like the Vitus. Schwalbe tires, amazing. They still have tubes in them. I have tubeless sealant in the mail, and I can't wait to change that out so I can lower the pressure a little bit, because today was pretty uncomfortable running high pressure tubes front and back. An interesting bit, the pedals. I was talking to a friend that just got this, and I was asking what pedals he's riding, what he swapped to, and he said, I didn't swap the pedals, which blew my mind. I mostly swap everything I'm mentioning, usually, on bikes. These are metal body with threaded pins. These are totally usable. I didn't think about them all day. I just rode them, tons of grip, feel comparable to race face chesters. You still might want to swap, but these are usable right out of the box. The only peripheral that doesn't seem to be usable for 99% of people is the saddle. It's small, it's pretty basic, no real channel to it, and the back of it gets really thin. I didn't think it was that bad at first. I was doing some small rides, and I put my first big ride in today, and it wasn't horrible, it wasn't life destroying, but it's not going to work long term. I'll be replacing this with something, not sure yet. Maybe a fabric, maybe a WTB. We'll see. Still shopping around. But comparing that to the Vitus, I've already mentioned the Vitus has great tires. The Vitus came with, it just came with basic pedals. I had to swap them out. The grips that it came with were really awful hard compound. Had to swap that out. But the Vitus came with a slightly better saddle. So these are peripherals that you're basically meant to swap to your taste, which is why they usually don't put too much effort and money into them. It's a place where you can cut costs, but I mean, Polygon did an amazing job. These grips, soft compound, great, totally usable. Pedals, metal body, threaded pins, totally usable. Schwalbe tubeless ready. Rims are tubeless ready. Just swap out the seat probably. I think maybe children and lower weight adults might be able to do it, but the real lack of channel and then overall lack of padding, where you either want a channel or padding or something, but you kind of go straight to the base of the seat in the middle, and you're gonna get pain in that area eventually on a long ride. So the suspension design, I didn't look too much into this. Obviously with the Vitus, that has a sort of 4-bar horse link, very traditional design, and I do love that for aggressive riding, jumping big drops. I haven't heard anything bad about this design. I'm not sure what they call it. Apparently it's similar to a single pivot, though it's technically looking at 2 pivots here. They call it a faux bar, so not 4-bar, but kind of rides like a 4-bar. I enjoy it for pedaling, whether you use that switch or not. I think it's a much more efficient design. I can't at this moment put in some really hard riding into the bike. You should look at other reviews for that. Still recovering from multiple injuries technically, but the big one in January. So I won't be able to really test that suspension design, bottoming it out, seeing how it feels under true pressure. But if you're looking for efficiency, I can say without a doubt that this is far superior to what I was feeling on the Vitus, which had a ton of bob, and I ended up swapping the shock because of all the bob to where I'd be just locking it out, and that's great. But maybe you don't want to necessarily lock out on a climb. Maybe you want some traction. You still want your suspension to be actuating, so this just makes it nice. You can leave the suspension on, it stays very efficient, and you're still able to use it and gain traction under sort of obstacles up a hill. And then as far as brakes go, I didn't notice a huge difference. These Tektro levers, and I'm assuming the calipers are Tektro as well. It's a 4-pot, 2-pot mismatch. You know, they're not really bedded in. It's a brand new bike. I think they work fine, but one thing I did notice is that the levers just feel very lightweight and flimsy, and it's not a great feeling that you want out of your mountain bike brakes. You really want a little bit of weight to them. You want real consistent firm pull whenever you're doing. You don't want to kind of them to wiggle and then you pull the brake too hard and then you start bucking the Bronco down the hill. Dior shifter mechanism, similar, identical to Vitus. Dropper, lever, much the same. And that's about it for the Polygon T7. Comparing it to the Vitus Mythique VRS. Last time we spoke, the world was a bit different and everything was about $200 cheaper. Now this bike is $2K and the Mythique VRS is $2K as well. So very comparable. And I would recommend this bike over the other one to the majority of riders. But a case could be made for more aggressive riders. Again, like I said, for going the Vitus Mythique route, and maybe upgrading bits and bobs here and there, mostly the rear shock. Of course, there are cheaper models like the Mythique VR, and then Polygon is sort of re-releasing some of their cheaper models, which I don't necessarily recommend. If you have to save a buck, you can make some sacrifices here and there, like no dropper and normal through axles instead of boost, etc., etc. But I do believe that the Polygon Siskiu T7 is the best no compromises entry-level mountain bike. That is to say, you're getting everything that you really need and that you would get from more expensive bikes, such as air suspension front and rear, the climate assist switch front and rear, the dropper post, tubeless ready tires and rims, a wide range drivetrain, whether that be 11 speed or 12 speed, hydraulic brakes front and rear with 180mm rotors, and of course that's all in a nice convenient 1x setup. Can't ask for anything more.